that's fine. Okay, so can you introduce yourself and your title? And so we have that on the recording and we can refer to that and get everything correct.
Yeah, my name is Luis Olmedo. I am the executive director of Comité Cívico del Valle. We're an organization based in the Imperial County.
And well, let me ask you a question about Imperial County, because as we were talking earlier, the Salton Sea has numerous issues with agricultural pesticides running in there and other chemicals as well. And as the water has evaporated over the years, then the sand that contains all those chemicals and so forth blows and becomes airborne. So that was really the cause of a lot of problems. Can you describe the way things were a few years ago and how you guys were looking at things and what how you prioritized the needs of the community?
So as an organization, we consider ourselves an environmental justice organization. So we see it from that lens, as well as the fact that we're an organization that was founded by farm workers in the Imperial Valley. This has been our home for the last 35 years. I've been with the organization for 23 years. So I grew up in Imperial Valley, and I've seen the Imperial Valley from being out with my parents, working the fields, and I would say just kind of going through life and the years. And a lot of times we can be very sort of involved in our own sort of day-to-day and not necessarily be seeing air pollution or toxics or where we live and the conditions we live. A lot of times we ignore all of that. And so as someone who's lived here, when I came into Comité Cívico del Valle, and this was around 2000, my whole world changed. Everything that was part of the landscape and was normal suddenly was no longer normal. And so some of the early things that I got involved with was around the things then that the blinders go off and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that agricultural burning was a big deal. We see it all the time. We smell it all the time. And it was actually people from, good friends from state departments of public health or the Cali PA or the US EPA, as our network was already there when I got here. A lot of them started kind of pointing things that I was really unaware. And I still remember sitting down with some of some folks that worked at the state at the time, and then it's ag burning season, and so they saw a whole bunch of mushroom clouds with smoke, and it's like, what's going on? Is everything okay? Like, what are all these fires? And I just looked back and I was like, it's ag burning. What are you talking about? Oh, but they were so alarmed, and it was a real reality check for me when I saw their face and their reaction to it. We realized how much we've normalized it. Since then, obviously, as we took a deeper dive into our environment, we realized we don't have the best water quality. We're living next to contaminated and sometimes even Superfund sites that we didn't even know were in our own neighborhood. Air pollution, again, sort of became a part of our language, our mission. And we got so involved that we started going out there and connecting to others. I'm telling you, we weren't born with this knowledge. We import a lot of knowledge too, because there's other communities that have done this already. So in the environmental justice, we try to exchange ideas and best practices. And so we started going out there measuring the air, and we started measuring the trucks, how many axles, and we started measuring different parts of the community, like which is the cleaner community, which is the most impacted community. We started getting into understanding the Cleaner Act. We got it to a point where we realized that we kept persistently failing to meet federal standards. These are protections that we as residents, citizens, people who live in this community, we have those protections. And so, in 2010, we actually had to file a lawsuit against the federal government because they were failing to enforce and afford us those protections. And again, 23 years later, I wouldn't say we're necessarily scientists or researchers or experts, but we've been able to build a good team that have brought that expertise and that are working either within our own organization or working contracted. And so we've really built a huge arsenal of expertise to what it is today. And so just as that history of having to learn over these years, we've also have the history of how poor development has happened. Anytime we circumvent the law or our electeds try to cut deals because their metric is jobs, their metrics is taxes. Well, our metric is holistic. We want to make sure we have good jobs. We want to make sure we have community benefits. And in those jobs, we want labor agreements. We want to make sure that in scenarios as opportunities open up like they are right now with lithium and energy, those minerals are public patrimony. We want to make sure that if we are putting a critical ingredient, that this public patrimony that we feel is a very fair expectation, just like anyone in the business world would expect. If you're an investor, we're investing minerals, we want a profit share out of that. We want to be able to heal all the bad transactions that have happened historically. And we want to diversify our economy so we're not subservient to one industry that then controls our policies, our politics, pretty much our livelihood, to such a degree that they encapsulate. Yeah, I can't say that.
Encapsulate.
Yeah. So no one should have that kind of power, and so right now is a very critical moment to be able to diversify our economy, to create a better path forward. 100 years of agriculture, I appreciate them. I love agriculture, it's nothing to do with that, but we cannot be dependent on one single industry. We need to be able to create other economies here within our own agriculture economy and not necessarily compete with one another. We have room for more.
Mm-hmm. Can we jump forward to the Lithium Valley Commission? I know that you're serving on that with other representatives. Can you give me a little snapshot of what that commission is and does and who's participating in that? What parts of the community are represented?
The Lithium Valley
Can we stop there just for a second because we have a little problem with the bandwidth, and if we wait just a second, it'll probably clear. So just count to 5 or something like that. Okay, so thank you. You can start.
The Lithium Valley Commission.
So let's start again. I'm sorry, we lost that. I'll give you a moment. So we're ready anytime.
The Lithium Valley Commission was a great idea. Thanks to our assembly member, we were able to have an opportunity for this commission to carry out a mission, which is to put a report of how this industry could successfully move forward, establish itself, and address many aspects, from the socioeconomics, the environmental, the being able to extract these minerals in a sustainable way. So we had a very diverse group of commissioners, and the goal of the commission was met, which is to produce a report. We submitted that report in in December, I think in November, December of 2022. So since then, the commission has already been sort of sunset and retired. We made that choice. There's a lot of moving parts to establishing this industry, from the manufacturing to the extraction to the environmental jobs. There's just so many different, and we as a commission, I think we all had a different reason as to we felt that retiring it was the best option. I can tell you what, and I don't share this much, but I'm happy to say as to what my reasons were. Is just I felt that there just wasn't enough representation from the fence line community. We want to make sure that there was a strong prominent voice from this community, and the commission didn't provide that. And I'm very concerned that everybody's looking out for their interests that they represent. And those interests were very large and expansive in many directions. There were many visions. We want to make sure that we don't repeat the history of other mining towns that have had sort of a very short lifespan. There's a lot of extraction, a lot of harm, a lot of benefit, but then the legacy of harm stays behind. And then when that industry's gone, these towns die. We want to make sure that we have more say, more participation in the visioning, in the structure at all levels, from the economics, the jobs, the community benefits, and the profit sharing, the taxes and the way that they get distributed. We have an opportunity of a lifetime here. A lot of times when environmental justice is discussed, there's always this feeling of, oh, they're here to kill projects. And that is the wrong characterization of environmental justice. Our goal is to be able to create and to be able to facilitate, to the extent that we can, a well-balanced economy, a sustainable economy. We don't want too much in any direction. We want to make sure that all parties and all stakeholders are represented, because environmental justice means economic justice. It means jobs justice. It means community benefits justice. All these things let me compare it in this way. Everything that is good for a well-established, beautiful communities, and there are many in this country, beautiful communities where they have beautiful landscapes, they have the best education, they have the best tourist attractions, they have the best jobs, they have everything. That's the American dream. And so we shouldn't be then characterized as like, oh, they're anti this or they're anti that. No, we're for everything that is the American dream, but we are not for hoarding dollars for one special interest or eliminating opportunities and assigning harm to disadvantaged, low income, or disengaged, communities that have barriers in participation. We're not going to be okay with that, because we wouldn't be okay with that for others who participate and have political influence and access. We want the American dream, and the American dream is for everyone.
Mm-hmm. I was reading something about the commission and the public comments being available publicly. Has that taken place? Are they available? Because I know there's lots of different points of view on everything, and it would be very interesting to see that.
Oh, absolutely. Those comments were available almost real time. The Energy Commission, where the commission lived, California Energy Commission, they had a tremendous team of staff who made sure that they provided all the resources necessary to be able to engage the community, whether it's language access, transcription of the meetings, as well as posting all the comments and making all those comments available to the commissioners so that we can make informed decisions. We held a lot of public meetings. We went to communities, fence line, front line, and we met, from a regional perspective to a local.
Mm-hmm.
We met and we try to create all the access. We can always do better. There's always going to be room for improvement, but I never saw that there was any motivation to not create that access or to not really go out of our way to try to create the best possible conditions. But like I said, we could always do better. But in most cases, a lot of times decisions are being made without the community, and we felt that there was a good effort.
Yeah.
Would I say that it was the best? As our standards, because we are working with disadvantaged, disengaged communities with so many barriers. If you ask me, no, it wasn't good enough. But when I compare it to other governmental practices, I would say that, yeah, the commission did an extraordinary job.
Well, sure. And I have experience with the solar build out a few years ago and actually litigated on behalf of some of your farm worker friends. And we did pretty well by tying up the process for about 5 years and seeding doubt about the development plans. And part of the issue there is something that I'm seeing at Thacker Pass, which is also a lithium extraction mine, completely different than what you're doing there. And we'll talk about that. But the federal government, starting with the Mining Act of 1872, pretty much stacks the decks, doesn't it? I mean, if valuable minerals are found on the property and 4 stakes are put in the corners, basically, then under the Mining Act of 1872, they have the right, companies have the right to proceed, right, and to start mining. And in many cases, that precludes, the kind of conversations with the community you're talking about, and they kind of ram it through. So was that a concern of yours? And do you feel that that's been sufficiently addressed with, BLM permitting and proper care with other laws like the National Register, National Historic Preservation Act, and others?
Well, I whether the right is there or not, again, from our perspective is we're not at a point right now because we're so early in the process. This is the best case scenario happening in the Imperial Valley, or otherwise known as Lithium Valley.
Right.
In other areas, these projects have moved forward, and I wasn't there to witness it, but we've seen terrible outcomes. Legacy of harm, communities harmed that will never be made whole again, and land that will never be used, at least in our lifetime or many lifetimes into the future. Right now, we're in the best possible scenario that we can be, at least judging it from being an advocate for 23 years. We have a president who has made environmental justice, community justice, equity, and turning direction in a new way, a better way of building our economy, a more sustainable way. We have a governor who is running a state, a powerful, right, that state when it comes to our economic power, that is really driving that agenda around climate and around resilience and around assuring that environmental justice and disadvantaged communities are front and center. They're not just saying it. A lot of times, our communities, we've been promised. I talk to advocates who have been around for 50 years of things that still haven't been solved today. And they say, they promised me, they told us, they shook our hand, they looked us straight in the eyes. These are good people who come from a time that was worth something. But now we know better. It needs to be put in ink, it needs to be in a paper, and that paper needs to be enforceable. And we're seeing that. We're seeing policy, we're seeing monies, we're seeing so much. And then we have policymakers in our own communities that are really changing the face of politics. They're becoming more representative of communities like ours. I mean, we're over 85% Latinos, sometimes referred to as communities of color, disadvantaged, low income. We have federal, state representatives, and even local representatives stepping into positions of power that come from that those same communities, that understand those communities, that want the same thing we do. We want equity. We don't want to say like, oh, let's get rid of this top level and shift it all to over. That's just going to create another top level, right? We're trying to create a balance where everybody wins, everybody succeeds. And so going back to your comment about the access, anybody can have access and a right to do something in this country. People have a right to drive from one community to another and use our public, freeways. It doesn't mean that they can speed. It doesn't mean they can dump trash on the side of the road. It doesn't mean they can, create a bonfire in the middle of a freeway. So I mean, it's the same thing with these industries. There might be a document that says, hey, you have a right to go out and extract these minerals, but there are laws that and I'll say laws because sometimes I'm not even gonna go as far as expect people in business necessary to feel like they're human, right? Business is business. They're about the bottom line. I'm not going to say, oh, you got to have a moral. No, there are laws. And as long as you comply to the laws, and if those laws don't go far enough, then we'll go and make sure we put more laws in the books. But at the very minimum, you meet all the laws in the book. That's what we're expecting. And it's up to us that we're becoming smarter advocates. We're connecting. I imagine you have a legal background. It sounds like you've interacted with the law before. Didn't you mention that? I'm
Journalism,
sorry, Robert, but
just journalism. Try
oh,
to stay away from
journalism.
the
Okay,
law.
so you've seen the
Yeah.
law, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so we're definitely bringing in with more resources available. We're being able to hire more experts, scientists, researchers, CEQA attorneys, NEPA attorneys. You know, it's like what we call leveling the playing field. Industry has deep pockets to hire all these experts to look out for its best interest. Government has their experts. Well, now in this case, in this scenario right now, thanks to philanthropy, thanks to our governor, and thanks to the changing climate locally with our government, they seem to be more in tune with equity and justice. They are. And it's either because they really see that it's in our best interest, or they see the dollar signs attached to these, goals and metrics around equity and justice. Whatever the case is, we're in a position of, I would say, in a position of power like we've never been before. And I think my hope is that we're able to create a better blueprint as to how to extract these minerals, because one thing we want, and one thing's for certain, we need to reduce greenhouse gases, carbon from our atmosphere, because we are in a self-destructive mode right now. And so we want to be part of that solution. And a major contributor is carbon emissions from vehicles, from large freight trucks, trains, to passenger, family-owned vehicles. And if we can produce a transitional, I will call it, transitional option until we find the technologies that can, where we can take advantage of the wind or water or other minerals that are less harmful to extract. We know that lithium is perhaps going to be far less destructive than fossil fuel. So that's where we're at right now. We're really trying to do this. If this is the option, we want to make sure that it's done right. And I do have to say that this state and this country is doing the right thing, but also assuring that Native tribes have a prominent voice in this conversation, because as environmental justice, we have partnerships with tribes, and we have to respect and honor, and it's a hard place to be, because some tribes are like, no, you can't dig into Mother Earth, like that's sort of out of the question, while others are looking for economic opportunities too, so it's layers upon layers of really trying to figure out what's the best path forward. But sometimes it's not even about us anymore. It's not whether we extract or not. That option has been taken from us. It's just whether it's going to be done safely and it's going to be done sustainably.
Very good explanation. Thank you so much. And I'm following with your wisdom and understanding of the balance and harmony that's required. Let's go to the devil in the details. I don't know specifically what all the devils and details are, but I kind of have an idea. If you point over here, you might find some difficulties. So looking at the Lawrence Livermore Lab assessment of extraction of lithium from brines, they have said it holds great promise economically and for communities, but the other side of the coin is, quote, many technical challenges remain. So basically, I know you have these geothermal wells at the south end. You've got 11 of them, and that they produce water from beneath the Earth's surface, hot water, and it comes up through pipes. and it provides energy in the current form and then goes back down in the ground. And so the plan that you have, or the plan that is put in front of you, is that the brine comes out of the ground and it goes to a secondary processing facility or technology where the lithium is extracted and then the water goes back down in the ground. So questions that I've seen are that we don't really know how much lithium we can bring up. Is that correct? Do you look at things like this in your planning? Because this is untested technology, right? It's never been done. So do we have a year's worth of lithium, or 2 years, or 5 years? And then if it starts to run thin, do we then have a market incentive to say, let's drill deeper, farther, faster over this fault, this seismic fault? So can you address those issues and how you look at that in the planning going forward, how you plan to approach those kinds of questions? Because these are world-class technology questions, right? I mean, Silicon Valley doesn't have the answers. And it's up to you guys, ultimately, I think, you know?
Yes, definitely. We have an entire community of researchers who are very eager to get the questions and then go out and seek the funding to go and answer those questions. I think we have to be very diligent in how we do this. One is we have to make sure that the type of science that is used, that is helping us solve those problems and respond to those questions in a way that was usable and translatable and implementable. I'll give you an example. As Salton Sea, a lot of times we refer to it, has been studied to death. We don't want to study this new industry to death. We want to make sure that if there's limited pool of dollars, right? And researchers are always going to be, in the pressures of publish or perish. Sorry about that. Publish or perish. And so, yeah, we have to be very diligent and make sure that our communities aren't just being mined for information, but that we have a coordinated approach as to what are those questions that we need answers. And you brought up some of them. How long is this resource there and sustainable? How much quantity? These are questions that I can point to, like one agency that is actually one entity that is looking at that, and that's the Berkeley Lab. I know they're working on that. I've seen University of Riverside very eager to go out and try to answer some of these questions. There's actually because very few times do we get opportunities in this corner of the country, of the state. We want to make sure that also our local academic institutions are also helping answer some of those questions. Why? Because it's not going to be the only time we're going to need that type of capacity, especially if we're looking to diversify in our economy. We know that these minerals, that some of them are more difficult to extract. We know that lithium, as far as we've heard from the industry, we've heard from researchers, it is a science. It's not like you're just trying to separate gold or these hard metals from an ore, but it's like you take it from a liquid to a solid and crystallize it and back to, and then depending on where you're going to manufacture, I've heard that's recent is like, well, they got to take it from a liquid to a solid and then to a liquid. And it's very interesting. But I think a lot of this information, at least from the industry side, much of it is being characterized as intellectual property. Now, that's where we're going to have some trouble, I think. And the reason why is because the communities have a right to be informed. We need to be informed as to what chemicals are being utilized and what kind of risk are there to release those chemicals into the air, into the water, into our land that are going to have a harm into our environment, our entire ecosystem, including human health. I'm very confident that the industry is making lots of progress, and some of them are talking about maybe as early as 2 years that they've already been ready to go, sort of full scale market scale production. Again, I think in some cases we're still trying to convince the federal government, where they have the sort of the larger resources to be able to invest in this industry. I know the state is certainly convinced. You don't have to convince the state because the state wants this. It's really about the federal government And the federal government a lot of times is making decisions, not really looking at the opportunity here in our own community. But some of the things, and even though I'm not going to be able to answer you the questions that you raised, those are important questions that we're waiting for right now. We're waiting for that information to make informed decisions. The other part of it is that there are going to be waste streams that exist right now just with geothermal. With geothermal, you have 3 classifications of waste, and that's one is it's either hazardous, it's below the hazardous level threshold, or sometimes depending on the mixture of minerals. You know, you got some, you know, not toxic minerals, you have some very toxic minerals, and you end up with radioactive material that at times, you know, they have to push the emergency button and get all the cleanup crews in to handle that hazardous waste. So with the lithium extraction, you know, some of the information we're getting, and I'm not going to assign it to a specific company or so on. I mean, I'm not going to get into that. But what some of the experts are telling us is that if they'd say like in an average a day, you know, there's like 20 tons of hazardous materials, that when you and that hazardous material might be hazardous, might not. When you you go through the lithium processing, 100% of the material is going to be toxic, and it's going to be a minimum of 10 times that size. So in a scenario where you have 20 tons of hazardous materials, well, now you're going to have 200 tons of hazardous materials. And so we want to make sure that part of what we're doing, we're advocating and finding ways to create standards that California has, that the United States has, that are managing the waste cradle to the extent possible. It would be the dream that 100% would be recyclable and manageable. That has to be our goal, because if we fall below that goal, then we have less waste to deal with. You know, so but that's kind of where we're at. We have considerable concerns. One of the reasons we have considerable results, and this is important, that we have considerable concerns. One of the reasons is because we are the perfect candidate to end up with the harm. We're the perfect candidate. You know, we have a community that is considerably ill in comparison to the rest of the state, have people with respiratory problems. When COVID hit, per capita, we had the largest amount of death and permanent, you know, harm. We also have large unemployment, poverty. It's just all the characteristics of, this is the worst possible conditions. And so we're the perfect candidate as to where companies can really take advantage of. And I would even say that even government can really take advantage of us. Why? Because our expectations are less than, let's say you go to Beverly Hills, or you go to Palm Springs, which is our neighbor to the west, northwest. You know, I've been out there and they don't even, I've never even seen a fast food place, you know, where you go like drive through, you know. It's just that the standards of cleanliness and community respect are where everybody should be. But I know that we're perfect candidates to be taken advantage of. And for that reason, we are taking extra precautions to make sure that we don't end up with the harm, but that we create policies and that we hold those policies to the higher standards so that we end up with the best possible outcome.
Well, I thought I was going to ask you the hard questions now, but you answered them in your last 5 minutes. You know, I mean, I've heard that mining companies are expert at taking advantage of poverty. That was just one quote, you know, so I would maybe check that out as a journalist, but I think you've answered that, and satisfactorily, you know, to the point that it's very clear what you're saying, that you felt the imperative to create a process, you know, an equitable process and a reasonable process and a technically sophisticated process.
Right. And look, just to clarify, when I'm talking about these, whether it's fossil fuel, whether it's manufacturing, any of these industries that have a high probability of causing enormous amount of waste, pollution, and harm. Let me give you a different metric, because I want to make sure that it doesn't turn into something that you have to fact check. California has 3 hazardous waste dumps, and all those 3 communities are all low income, farm working, communities of color, disadvantaged. All the metrics that are captured in the Calivirus screen in the state with the cumulative impacts. All 3 communities, Button Willow, Kettleman, and right here in our own community, Westmoreland, all 3 dumps. Okay, so we know that that's what I'm talking about, is that we are the prime candidate for these types of facilities. And part of that is, yes, these companies are going to go where the minerals are at. All right, but I'm not really sure they're going to go out and you find it underneath, like, Beverly Hills, if they're going to remove a few of those, mansions or
Right.
shopping centers, and then say, like, I don't think it's going to be that easy to just go in there and drill and say, hey, we have a right to these minerals, so move out of the way. I think they're going to have a mob of wealthy, affluent, rich people saying, no way, you ain't going to dig anything here, and if you are, you're going to pay me twice the cost of what you're going to get out of that mineral, or we're going to sue you, right? They're going to discourage them to go somewhere else. So that's what I'm talking about, is that there's very clear, there's a double standard, as to where they go out and create this industry. Some of those are, again, based on where the mineral and the resources, but we have 2 issues here. One is, the good one is that we have the resource, but the bad one is that we are a disadvantaged, poor community, and that's not a good combination. So that's not supposed to be a discouragement. That's just that, we know where we're at, and we know what we need to do to make sure that we end up with the best possible outcome and that we succeed. Our goal is to succeed. The industry's goal is to succeed. Our government goal is to succeed. We're just not going to be a pushover. We have a seat at the table. Again, going back, thanks to the president and his people, thanks to the governor and his people, thanks to our legislator, and thanks to our advocacy and philanthropy, who had put communities like ours in positions of power. That's the best case scenario.
Well, that's a pretty great wrap up. I really don't have a follow-up, but I was thinking, thank you, and I can work with everything that you provided for me in this interview, and I would like to come back at a later point and do a follow-up, if that's all right. Would you feel comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
I just want to see how things go, or I want to work more on my other stories that have something to do with lithium. Like, for instance, I'm going to interview Bradley, and we'll probably talk about the general topic of environmental justice and his experience, and his work with the Ute tribe and uranium, and what they have in common, what they don't have in common with all these mining issues. So I'm taking on a really big concept. That's why I'd like to come back to you if it's not making sense. It's my bailout. I can always call you up and say, hey, Luis, can you really clarify this for me, because I don't get it. Yeah. So that's kind of just to let you know.
Whatever you need, I feel very strongly about my comments. Just so you know, I try to be responsible in the way that I share what I share. I try not to be someone who comes across as knows it all. I'm going to stick to what I know, and but that's why, anything that we don't know, we try to go out there, raise dollars, and try to hire the expertise that we need, because, like I said, anyways, and another subject is, if you feel that in the future, you want to do another interview and so on, and if you have a certain way you want me to, because I tend to go on and on and on. You tell me, hey, make sure you have stops every minute, and just let me know, and I'll try to give.
Okay, no, great. It was a really good interview. I thought it was exceptional the way that you explained the issues and your perspective and the organization's perspective. It was just exceptional. So I'm really serious there. I don't have any further questions right now, but it's a really difficult topic. I mean, it's very technologically complicated.
Yeah.
And I just, I trust that, people who know how to do these things can do them. And that, we talked about issues, with the seismic stuff, and we talked about the unknowns with the amount of lithium. Those are very serious, questions. And I, I think it'd be interesting to see how some of that goes and to see what other developments there are in the community. So just one more question. So Lithium Valley, when you discussed Lithium Valley, I was joking with Bradley, I think, and I said, oh, it's kind of like they're trying to, do the Silicon Valley thing. So it sounds all techie and this kind of stuff, which it is, right? But I'm just teasing. So where is Lithium Valley? Is it an actual physical place where we're going to say, if you're over here doing this work, that's great, you get a subsidy or you get something beneficial to do that, and then over here it's not really in the area, so not so much? Or is it more of a concept of we're working together for this and we have a group and we have a process?
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant idea to identify the Imperial Valley as Lithium Valley. I think it does sort of push and drive that agenda of there's a resource of opportunity of a lifetime here. And the vision could be where manufacturing, technology, jobs of all types, all kinds of jobs this could really, it's a game changer for an area like Imperial Valley. And yes, just like it was for Silicon Valley. And like it is.
Well, I was there when it was orchards. You'd see pear orchards and peach orchards. And I have a friend who grew up there, and she saw, the land and the creeks where she used to play as a child get paved over and become like Fairchild Semiconductor and all that. But there were benefits. I worked there for 20 years, something like that. We all made a bunch of money. We created the internet. There's a thing called the internet now that, we're taking advantage of. It came out of that, and I witnessed that, in my life, my generation.
Now,
and
oh, go ahead, sir. Apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in that. I think that's, a fantastic, way to create a revolution. Like some of the people that I've spoken to over the years said, well, if you want to change everything in society, change the technology underpinnings. So that's the kind of way you have the opportunity to do. What's approvable, what's not approvable, what meets community standards. Sorry, you can go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. I appreciate that because I, be honest with you, I never even knew that at one point Silicon Valley was orchards. That's
yeah.
And that it's a good example of what I was about to say, is that for us, I'm just speaking for Comité Cívico, we don't envision a community where we're going to get rid of agricultural land, because that's food. This is a critical element or a critical product that we need for life sustainability. Some might even characterize it as a sort of national security kind of issue. We don't want to have to import our fruits and vegetables from the outside. We don't want to kill the jobs of farm workers just to open up jobs in lithium extraction. We need to conserve the land for agriculture, but we have so much land out here, we can do both. We can have a diverse set of industries out here that do lithium extraction, do agriculture, and technology. I mean, there's just so much opportunity out here. So we're definitely not in a place where we're trying to replace an industry. That wouldn't be smart for us. That would be contrary to diversification. We're trying to conserve the agriculture and bring in the new lithium or other industries. There's going to be other industries. If lithium doesn't work, it's going to be something else. But there are going to be diversification on industries. I think this exercise we're going through right now, we're not going to stop. We're in a different mode, and we as a community are really pulling together. The other thing I'll say is that there's a lot of question as to what is Lithium Valley? Well, we knew and we were introduced to Lithium Valley as Imperial Valley. Those were the geographic boundaries of Lithium Valley. Now, we know that we're not naive that all is going to happen here. We know that there might be other more suitable places to, this could be a whole national infrastructure. It doesn't have to be in a Lithium Valley infrastructure. It could be a national. But we also see a lot of people who are very eager to take, to sort of cut a slice of the opportunity and bring it to, other areas. There's people come with master plans and regional plans and a lot of those they're not from our communities. Sometimes they're not even from our state. Sometimes they're not even from our country. It's people who show up as consultants and say, hey, we can do it better. They have the ear of the president. They have the ear of the governor. They have ear of key, people. And honestly, I feel like sometimes they just confuse the situation. There's nothing better just working with our own communities where we want to build. We are the ones that need to be consulted. We are the ones that are going to help set the vision, and every community should be given that respect, right? And so,
Yeah, I noticed there were some comments by somebody on the commission. I think was his name Ryan, something like that. He said, well, maybe these environmentalists, these Sierra Clubbers should get back in their Mercedes, and that kind of comment about separating the identity and the vision of different constituencies, whether it's environmental or whatever. But a lot of times, in rural areas, there's a sense of, God, I wish these people would get out of our way, right? So that's not really what you're talking about. Somebody just like mouthed off, it seemed like. Is that what happened?
we're from this community. We're committed. Everyone in this community is committed. We want to see this succeed. Some people are observers because they just don't have the know-how or the resources to be engaging. But I think one thing we all agree here is we need to work together to make this happen. And we're all going to have things that that we want to make sure are taken care of. Some just want the jobs. Some want to take the tax revenues. Some want the opportunity to build businesses, build hotels, build housing. I mean, it's endless of what we all want, and all of it is great, and it's all the dream we want to achieve. But yeah, definitely there's outsiders going to conferences, going out there and saying, like, oh yeah, Lithium Valley is all California, or it's all the Northwest, or Southwest, or all US, or oh, it's international. Like, those people aren't here. They're just people who are just consultants. They want to take a slice of the money that's there right now. That money needs to be redirected and be sent and zeroed in on making this opportunity successful. Because when we start writing checks everywhere in every direction, there's no coordination, and sometimes we get confused as being territorial. It's not territorial. It's common sense. The governor said these words when he was pushing for SB 125, which is a tax bill. He says, we need to make sure that we put center of gravity in Imperial. If we don't build the infrastructure here, nobody wins. Nobody wins. We need to build the infrastructure to make sure that this is successful here, that it is sustainable. Because if we build a whole economy where we're building all the moving parts and all the gears scattered everywhere, if you lose the main source of the critical mineral, then all of that is going to die. And we just set ourselves for failure. That's why we need to zero in here. We need to work locally. We need to make sure it works here, because we're going to be the driver of this industry for the next 40, 50, 60 years, at minimum. And then we need to be ready to be able to recycle all that infrastructure to put in other, replacement industries once we deplete that resource.
Well, that's pretty clear. Hey, thank you, man, for being with me today. So we'll stay in touch, and I'll be sending you a link to the podcast, and get your thoughts if we need them and that kind of thing. So it's been really a pleasure meeting you today and having the chance to talk to you. I wish you all the best of luck in everything you're doing with the balance that you're espousing.
Thank you, Robert. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and learning also from your expertise. And I look forward to future conversations.
Well, I focus on people, in my work, and is it fair? So a lot of environmental justice issues that's kept me busy, for the last 10 years fighting for people. you know.
Well, you're asking a lot
So-
of good questions, and we really rely on journalists like you to go out there and ask the questions, because those are the things we read about. You know, you're the one that's going out there talking to a lot of people, and that's how we connect community. That's how we connect, you know, across countries, across, you know, projects. So thank you, and we'll
Yeah,
talk to you.
thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Okay, good.